하이사이 원내 김혜지 섭부야의 비인 Left-Handed Asians Mensore. Hi, I'm Jessup, and welcome to Left-Handed Asians. Today, the island of Uchina, also known as Okinawa, is a major tourist destination known for its white beaches, warm weather, and unique culture. While now part of Japan, the Ryukyu Archipelago, which stretches 1,500 kilometers from Kyushu to Taiwan, has historically been composed of self-governing entities with their own diverse languages and cultures. The most notable of these was the Ryukyu Kingdom, a state which existed from the unification of Uchina in 1429 up until its annexation by Japan in 1879. From the Satsuma invasion in 1609 until the Ryukyu disposition by Meiji Japan in 1879, Ryukyu experienced a period of dual subordination in which the kingdom paid homage to the Chinese emperor through the Chinese tributary system, while also recognizing the authority of the Satsuma domain and the Tokugawa Bakufu. Despite its subjugation to Satsuma in Japan, Ryukyu elite society underwent rapid Sinicization during this period in a way which promoted both its perceived and actual autonomy within the dual subordination system. Japan's lack of official relations with China meant that it was to the advantage of both the Satsuma domain and the Bakufu for Ryukyu to maintain a fiction of independence and for the kingdom to appear as un-Japanese, that is, Chinese, as possible, in order for Japan to use Ryukyu as a conduit for obtaining both goods and information from China. This necessitated that the Satsuma domain keep considerable distance from Ryukyu, both cultural and physical, limiting the domain's control over the kingdom. Sinicization meant that Ryukyu kings continued to reign, while retaining a significant degree of control over Ryukyu's internal affairs, and continued to receive investiture by the Chinese court. One of the ways in which Ryukyu expressed itself as part of a Sinocentric world was through royal portraiture. Ugui were posthumously produced official royal portraits, at least 10 of which are known to have been painted for the second Shou dynasty, from dynasty founder Shou-in to penultimate king Shou-iku. Ryukyu royal portraiture, following the conventions of Imperial Chinese painting, reflected the view of Ryukyu as a respected member of the East Asian international system centered around China. Shou Guangkou, a painter under 5 Ryukyu kings, produced 8 of these portraits in 1796. Mo Shochi produced 2 additional portraits during the 19th century. These portraits, as well as any others which may have been created, were lost during the 1945 Battle of Okinawa. The content of the 10 portraits is known due to photographs taken by the Japanese textile artist and scholar Kamakura Yoshitaro prior to World War II. All physically existing ogui are reproductions based upon these photographs. The Ryukyu royal portraits produced during the 18th and 19th centuries mostly followed Chinese traditions of portraiture, although with notable differences. Chinese imperial portraits during the late Ming and Qing periods featured several commonalities. Among these were the portrayal of only the emperor himself, his placement sitting on a throne placed on top of carpet, and his surrounding by a significant amount of empty space. During the Ming Dynasty, around the year 1500, Chinese imperial portraiture also changed from previously naturalistic compositions to flatly frontal portrayals. This convention of flat frontal portrayals lasted until the end of China's imperial system in the early 19th century. Ryukyu portraits are all made in similar style. They all feature the king surrounded by his officials and retainers in hieratic scale. The king is centered and significantly larger than the others in order to emphasize his authority and power. They follow Chinese conventions such as full frontal views and the placement of the sovereign on an expansive carpet decorated with various geometric patterns. In addition, the king dresses himself in the symbols of royal Chinese authority, wearing both dragon robes and a pibian guan, a traditional form of headwear normally reserved exclusively for the Chinese emperor and his immediate family. Both were initially granted from China with investiture. Despite changes in court fashion from the Qing dynasty onward, Ryukyu officials continued to follow the styles of the Ming period. Interestingly, Ryukyu royal portraits also feature curtains, which are not present in Chinese-style portraits but are present in Japanese ones. Despite the similarities of these portraits, a significant change occurs in terms of dress from portrayals of kings who ruled from the 18th century onward, even within the portraits painted by Shou Guangkou. Early kings are portrayed wearing long and flowering but simple robes of red. However, Later kings are dressed in elaborate and somewhat tighter-fitting Chinese robes, adorned with various motifs, from geometric shapes to dragons. The growing complexity of the king's dragon robes followed their increasing ornamentation from the transition to the Qing from the Ming, while Ming robes limited decorations to a limited area on the front, back, and the shoulders. The Qing instead decorated the entire garment with an idealized rendering of the universe. There are obvious similarities in the designs of the robes of King Shou Buku and the Yongzheng Emperor. Both feature waves in the foreground, dragons in the middle ground, and clouds in the background. In 1754, the number of rows present on the Pibingguan is furthermore raised from 7, denoting the rank of a local ruler, to the 12 which is allowed only for the Chinese emperor. This is present from the portraits of Shou Buku onward. This was possible as the new Qing dynasty abolished the previous traditions of headwear and court dress, causing them to lose their meaning. A drastic change in terms of increasing complexity of dress can be seen when comparing Shou Guangquo's portrait of Shou Guan to Mo Chochi's portrayal of Shou Iku. In addition to the changes in dress, there is also a change in the background of the portraits. From the Ugui of the second Shou king Shou In to the Ugui of Shou Ho, one is able to see the details of the inside of the palace. All feature screen doors, flower vases, books, and writing materials in roughly the same position. In addition, the immediate background of the king features a large image which is split into lower and upper halves of waves and clouds respectively. On top, the clouds make way for the simultaneous presence of both the sun and the moon. The two ensuing portraits of Shou Ti and Shou Qi eliminate this background in favor of golden empty space, similar to Chinese imperial portraits. The remaining portraits from Shou Buku to Shou Iku add some clouds to this background. These clouds, however, have a significant stylistic difference from the clouds present in the earlier Ugui. Ruchu royal portraiture notably diverges from Chinese imperial portraiture in that Ruchu royal portraits are much busier than Chinese ones and lack much of the negative space present in official portraiture of other nations in the Sinosphere. Ruchu portraiture uniquely features the king alongside various officials and retainers, in contrast to traditions in both Ming and Qing China, in which the subjects of portraits stand alone. Earlier Ugui also featured detailed backgrounds rather than the empty space of Chinese imperial portraits and the relative empty space of later Ugui. In addition, official Ruchu royal portraits surround the subjects of the painting in the upper corners with curtains, a convention not followed in Chinese imperial portraits. However, while the inclusion of the curtains are Japanese in style, they feature a very Chinese motif, that of the dragon. Ruchu portraits are notably different in style from contemporaneous portraits of the Tokugawa shoguns or the Japanese emperor. Japan existed on the boundaries of Confucian civilization, and its limited participation in the Chinese ordered system is reflected through its portraiture. When comparing Japanese portraits to other nations in East Asia that are fully participatory within the tributary system, they are notably different and the most divergent from Chinese conventions. While portraits for both the shoguns and emperors are painted in 3/4 view, Ruchu royal portraits show the king in full frontal view in the manner of Chinese imperial portraits. There is also a stark contrast in the clothes worn in Ruchu and Japanese portraits. The Ruchu portraits feature the king wearing Chinese-style dragon robes in red, displaying the investiture granted to him by the Chinese emperor. In contrast, Japanese shoguns and emperors are featured wearing Japanese-style kimono. In 1609, Satsuma invaded and subjugated the Ruchu kingdom. While Ruchu had already been a tributary of Ming China, the dynamics of Japanese control over Ruchu under the East Asian international system presented a host of factors which pushed Sinicization on Ruchu both domestically and externally. Taking advantage of Japan's lack of the official diplomatic relations necessary for trade with China, the necessity of feigning independence from Japan, and its position as a mediator between Japan and China, the Ruchu kingdom intentionally sought Sinicization to preserve its existence. As Ruchu officials sought Sinicization to ensure their own autonomy, Japan also pushed Sinicization onto Ruchu from above. Japanese officials intentionally sought to differentiate Ruchu from Japan in order to conceal Ruchu subjugation from the Chinese, who did not have official diplomatic relations with the Japanese, nor allowed Japanese participation in the tributary system. Ruchu was a valuable conduit through which Japan could both conduct trade with China and obtain information about the rest of the world despite its maritime restriction policies. For Japan and the Satsuma domain, differentiating Ryuchu from Japan involved making Ryuchu appear more Chinese by promoting Ryuchu Sinicization, limiting Japanese physical presence on the islands, and banning various Japanese customs from being practiced in the kingdom. Joseon was another kingdom which participated in the Chinese tribute trade, and its kings also received Chinese investiture. Ryuchu and Joseon held similar ranks in terms of Chinese recognition, the kings of both having been granted the rank of Junwang. Unfortunately, similarly to Ryuchu, almost all royal portraits were destroyed by fire, along with 3,400 other royal artifacts, in a 1954 fire in Busan, where they had been moved during the Korean War. While extant portraits of Joseon kings made during the Joseon dynasty are largely limited to a portrait of Taejo and a few others, some paintings created during the 20th century have since become mainstream portrayals, including the famous portrait of King Sejong the Great by Kim Gi-chang. Korean portraits generally tend to stay closer to Chinese conventions than Ryuchu ones. However, Ryuchu and Joseon royal portraiture share similarities in that both rulers wear Chinese-style dragon robes. In addition, neither wears yellow, a color reserved for the Chinese emperor, and instead they opt to wear red, the next highest color in Chinese officialdom. There are notable differences, such as the presence of surrounding officials and curtains in Ryuchu portraiture, which appears uniquely Ryuchu. Interestingly, the kings of Joseon sat against a background which featured the same motif of the sun and the moon present in early Ugui, although with the natural features dominant in Korea, mountains, rather than waves. Nonetheless, they are not portrayed in Korean royal portraits, as the background of Korean portraits were empty rather than elaborate as in Ryuchu portraits. Ryuchu royal portraiture primarily followed Chinese conventions, but also featured some of its own indigenous alterations to traditional Chinese portraiture, as well as a limited degree of Japanese influence. These influences reflected the Ryuchu court's beliefs about its place within the China-centered system of international relations present in East Asia at the time, as well as the kingdom's strategy of intentional Sinicization to ensure its autonomy and survival. Ultimately, Ryuchu utilized Chinese-style royal portraiture to both preserve its existence as a state and create a sense of belonging within the contemporary Sinocentric international system. Thank you for watching.